So a couple of updates on Diddy. We have not fully confirmed this. We are hearing that Diddy is enrolled in a domestic violence and a drug treatment program, two separate ones, while behind bars.
The courtroom fell into a silence so thick it felt suffocating. Not calm or reverent, but oppressive, like the air itself had turned to smoke. In the center of it all, Diddy sat motionless, his back rigid, his body locked in place, as if even a breath might shatter whatever fragile control he had left.
Diddy is behind bars, but he is enrolled in two classes in jail. A class for drug abuse and one for domestic violence.
Domestic violence. These are programs that are offered by the federal government in the prison system for inmates, and he is enrolled in both of these programs. He's also, we're told, in therapy, separate from those two programs. And all of these things that he's doing, typically for one reason, to look good for the judge.
Well, it's important because sentencing comes up October 3rd. And Diddy, look, everything that I know tells me that he will get between 1 and 2 years. And I think it's going to be closer to 1. Prosecution is asking for 4. That's just not going to happen for a Mann Act violation. So if that's right, look, he wants to get the lowest he can get. And I think it's going to be between that 1 and 2 range. To get the 1, I think he's got to show the judge that he is taking his misdeeds seriously.
Right. And by the way, we know that even when the judge said that he was not going to let him out on bail pending sentencing, one of the things he mentioned was his violence. We've seen his violence.
Exactly.
So he knows that this is an issue for the judge.
And the defense conceded it.
Right. So that's something he definitely has to address. And that's what he's doing with this program.
I mean, Charles, he doesn't have to address it, but he is addressing it. And, this might help him with regards to his sentence. Maybe the judge might sentence him to lesser time because he's working on himself.
But Jamie, you know what the complication here is that he's been found not guilty on the charges that relate to drug use and domestic violence. That there was no conviction using force, fraud, or coercion in these 3 ways, and drugs. The Cassie video was off the table. The only thing he's been convicted of is taking a prostitute across state lines for the purpose of prostitution.
But can't the judge consider all of the testimony in the that was presented at the trial?
But the defense is going to say he was found not guilty on those things. So it's really kind of an interesting...
There's that, but there's another side of this. And Jamie, you've been working on this story for 5 days now to lock this down. But there was one key word, one of the sources you spoke to. You remember what that word was?
Yeah, redemption.
Yeah, because that's the other part of this, that this is Diddy looking at my life after prison, because now that he knows he's not going to be locked away for decades, not going to be locked away for the rest of his life.
His eyes locked on the judge, as if he still couldn't process the weight of what he just heard. This wasn't supposed to be the end, not for him. Not for the man who once ruled the music industry like a king atop a throne of platinum records and dark secrets. But the gavel had come down, and with it, everything he thought he'd buried came crashing through the courtroom doors. And as the judge read out the prison sentence, long, cold, and devastating, Diddy finally broke? Not in a dramatic scream at the sky kind of way number. It was subtler, more tragic. The kind of break that looks like someone's spirit detaching from their own body. His eyes weren't just glassy, they were empty. Like everything that made him feel untouchable had just been ripped out piece by piece in front of the world. People talk about karma, about balance catching up eventually. And here it was, not as a whisper, but as a full-blown collapse of an empire built on shadows. The jury's decision had been a split verdict.
Hearing today, sort of. We got to talk about why. Well, Judge Arun Subramanian had sent a tentative October 3rd sentencing date for Diddy on his convictions of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution. Remember, that's what he was convicted of. He was acquitted of racketeering conspiracy, and he was acquitted of the 2 sex trafficking counts, but he was convicted of these prostitution charges. And at one point, there was reporting that defense counsel for Sean Combs and prosecutors, they had then agreed to switch the date to September 22nd. And we thought, okay, because today's hearing was supposed to be about expediting the October hearing. Then they agreed to September 22nd. Now apparently it's back to October 3rd. This is all over the place. Very confusing. We'll get it straightened out. I gotta say it's interesting because Combs' defense counsel had originally stated last week, when it was the October 3rd date, that they wanted that sentencing expedited, meaning they wanted it to happen sooner. And one of the things that Sean Combs' attorney, Mark Agnifilo, had said was, quote, the mother of some of his children had passed away many years ago. These kids, the 2 daughters here sitting in the middle of Your Honor's second row, don't have a parent. Obviously referring to the death of Kim Porter in 2018, mother of Christian, Jesse, Delilah, Quincy. And by the way, remember Sean Combs was denied bail, so it wasn't even like he got to go home after the verdict, but clearly they wanted this expedited. They want his sentencing to happen as quickly as possible. They want him out of jail. They want him out of prison as soon as possible. And also it's interesting because prosecutors, they need time for the pre-sentencing investigation and report. Basically, that's when a probation officer interviews the defendant, looks at the history, the background, childhood, education, employment, criminal history, finances, the mental and physical health of the defendant. There are interviews that are conducted with family and friends. The officer looks at various court and school records, employment records, financial records. The officer could speak to the victims in the case, law enforcement that were involved in the investigation, provide all of this information in a report to the judge, because here the judge is going to have a lot of discretion when it comes to the sentence. What could a sentence look like? Well, prosecutors indicated in a filing that before even doing a pre-sentencing investigation, Combs is looking at 51 to 63 months, a little over 4 to 5 years in prison. The defense seems to be pushing for 21 to 27 months, so a little over 1.5 to 2 years. But remember, Combs has been sitting in federal lockup since September at the MDC, so if he gets time served, he really wouldn't be spending that much time behind bars. Now, of course, there are the extremes. When you talk about transportation to engage in prostitution, the maximum for each count is 10 years in prison. You stack them together, you get 20 years. Okay, based upon the facts in this case, it seems highly unlikely he would get that much. Other side, you get the idea. There's no minimum for this charge. So could he get time served and walk free? Also seems unlikely in that you're dealing with multiple.
He wasn't found guilty on every charge. Some of the flashier, headline-grabbing ones didn't stick, but enough did. And what the judge handed down wasn't a slap on the wrist. It was a hammer. The courtroom didn't just react to the sentence because of its length. They reacted because of the tone. There was no mercy, no leniency, no nod to his celebrity status. What Diddy received was a message loud and final. Your fame, your fortune, your legacy, none of it will shield you when the mask falls. And fall it did. Over the course of the trial, what had once lived in whispers and blind items transformed into damning clarity. One by one, witnesses stepped into that courtroom and tore through the illusion. They spoke of the lavish parties, the veiled threats, the manipulation, the fear that soaked every corner of his inner circle. The kind of stories that used to be dismissed as clickbait or internet conspiracy were now part of the public record, spoken under oath, under harsh fluorescent lights, with the weight of the law pressing down. And then came the moment that sealed it all. Not a leaked video or a last-minute smoking gun. It was a voice. Unsteady, cracked, but unflinchingly honest. Someone who had once stood beside Diddy, who'd shared in the perks and the protection, now stood against him. Their testimony wasn't just recounting events. It was a window, a rare, harrowing look into the machinery of power, control, and silence that most people had only imagined. And once the jury looked through that window, There was no turning away.
It was an interesting argument because who would monitor him. It was interesting because the prosecution at one point had said it's not fair, right? He's a wealthy celebrity who's providing a bail package that other people in his similar position wouldn't be able to provide. Now, the defense was like, well, the only reason we're presenting a package like this is because of what he's accused of and his wealth and his resources. We have to address that in a certain way. The reason it's so extensive is because of his wealth and resources. That bail package that was put forward was rejected by the court. What did you make of that?
Well, at that time, the judge was looking at the RICO Act and sex trafficking. So, Puffy was looking at possibly 25 years, or more, depending on what the guidelines were based on if he was convicted. So at 55 years old, at that time, it's almost a life sentence. So, and he has a lot of wealth and he had a private plane. So the judge was looking at that. Plus, in the federal system, they look at danger to the community. Where in the state system, they're not allowed to look at that. They look at risk of flight. So I think with all the letters behind that were coming in that we were not really privy to from a lot of the alleged victims, I think the judge made a decision that, hey, this is not going to be sufficient enough. I thought that at the end, he kind of, when we brought in our private security team and we showed him who was going to be doing it, and we did Sam Bankman-Fried. So we knew that, we would be completely covered on that end. And we gave him the idea of there would be no Wi-Fi in the building that we were looking at, and that he would not be able to connect with anybody but his legal team and his family. We thought at that point that maybe we had a chance, but at the end, the judge denied it, and that's where we stood. And now on this case coming forward, after the convictions, after he wasn't convicted, at the end, we didn't know what he was going to do. So, when Mark reached out to me afterwards, we started thinking about putting another bail package together.
And what is that bail package and by the way, is this a bail package that you think could be submitted again, even after the judge just denied bail?
Well, the judge denied bail based on the statute, and the statute stated a certain amount of information that part of the Mann Act that, was not eligible for bail. There are certain circumstances that can be done. We're going to regroup again. I know that they were going to go talk to Mr. Combs again and see what happens there. They have the October 3rd date. And I don't know where he stood. As of the other day, he wanted to get out. I don't think anybody wants to be at MDC where he is. So we're going to reconvene and see what happens, at a later date. We could go back with another package.
Would it require him to stay in New York? Would it be him to be, I know he wanted to go back to his property in Miami, Florida. And there's also an interesting question, I think, that his defense put forward.
It was the world behind the velvet ropes, a hidden realm where rules bent to power, and influence was a drug far more potent than anything sold in back alleys or VIP lounges. For years, Diddy had ruled that world, untouchable, untamed. But now, seated under courtroom lights instead of stage lights, his reign was unraveling. He kept his posture firm, his expression unreadable, but the cracks showed in subtle ways. The tight clench of his jaw, the restless tapping of his foot beneath the table. Each witness chipped away at the myth. Every revelation pulled another thread loose. He thought he could ride it out, that the machine he'd built, fortified with wealth, high-priced attorneys, and carefully cultivated connections, would shield him, that the performance of power would hold. But the moment the jury returned, the air changed. A shift you couldn't see, but everyone felt. The silence was suffocating. Before the foreperson even opened their mouth, you could sense it. The reckoning had arrived. Then the words. Guilty. Not on every count, but on enough to bury him for decades. The real blow wasn't just the time, it was how quickly it came. The judge didn't hesitate, didn't give space for tears or disbelief. The gavel didn't just fall, it crashed, like a door slamming shut on an era. In that moment, Diddy crumbled. His shoulders sank, his head bowed, and the illusion shattered. The mogul, the icon, the larger-than-life figure was gone. What remained was a man, small, stunned, and suddenly mortal in a way he'd never allowed himself to be. His legal team sat in stunned silence, their confidence stripped. They had wagered everything on loopholes and legacy. But this wasn't just a verdict. It was a statement. And the judge made it painfully clear. Your power doesn't excuse your past. Your influence doesn't erase your actions.
He was the IMF, president, and nobody knew if he was on his way going back to Greece to lend him X amount of money to get him out of trouble. Yet we had to find him an apartment in the city. We had to get him private security. I was dealing with his ex-wife now, coming in and giving me what I need to put a $5 million bail together. So, they're a little more demanding, and everybody's looking to me to make that, make it happen. The lawyer could get the bail, but at the end of the day, it's Ira Jellison that's running in, putting everything together, and the pressure. And I work in chaos all day long. That's my life. So, when it comes to chaos, that's my specialty.
You handle it well, though. You handle it quite well, given the chaos.
I have to. If I, as I said before, if I want to, have a nice home, I want my kids to go to college, I want things to happen. You got to do these things, and people rely on you.
Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said here, and it's important that you said it. Your reputation's on the line. So the idea of when we say, nebulous, how can we trust a private security team? I'm happy you clarified that. I want to get really practical here, realistically. Sean Combs is released on bail, okay? Let's say he's released, he's home confinement. What exactly is he allowed to do and not to do? Is he really, there's someone's going to be watching him 24/7. They're going to make sure he has no iPad, no iPhone. Can he give directions to people like associates or other people that are involved? I mean, the concern, of course, is that even if he's out and he's around people, he can still shake things up a little bit. He can still get messages out. I guess the question is, what does it realistically look like for him? Does he sit in a room? Does he only confined to certain rooms day in and day out? Is he constantly watched on tape and all of his electronic devices are searched on him constantly? I mean, what does it look like?
Well, again, it's really up to the restrictions of the court.
Sure.
I have people out right now that are on ankle bracelets. And, they can't go, 400 feet. They can go 800 feet. They can go, wherever, depending on what the restrictions are. In Puffy's case, the way we were putting it to the judge and to the Southern District was we were going to have a call log. So you could see who his calls were going to. We were going to try to take away his Wi-Fi in the building, which would have been a lot easy. We would have limited the people that would come see him. So at the end of the day, we had cameras inside the apartment that we were going to do, which our people were going to put up. And we were going to all let the government be able to get into that system to see who was coming in and out. Of course, there's privacy. So, we were going to make it very, very tight. Now, when you're incarcerated, and I have a lot of friends that I know that that are incarcerated. When people come to see you, if you want to pass a message, messages can get passed. We know that. So if he really wanted to do something incarcerated, he might be able to. If he really wanted to do something when he was out, he might be able to. I don't think that he would take a chance on something like that to risk what he's gone through over the last year. Again, opinion on my end, based on being 30 years in the industry, you just got possibly your life back. You were facing 30 years incarcerated possibly, and now you're going to take a chance on something like that. But again, no, I'm not in someone's brain. I can't determine how people think. There's a lot of people that feel they're above the law. So I don't know how Puffy thinks.
Your fame didn't erase your actions. And this courtroom wasn't swayed by platinum records or industry pull. It was cold, exact, and final. A message sent not just to Diddy, but to everyone watching. No more special treatment, no more untouchables. The verdict hit like a lightning bolt. Social media lit up instantly, half the world in disbelief that justice had finally caught up. The other half, furious it hadn't gone far enough. Some mourned the fall of a cultural titan, clinging to nostalgia and memories. Others rejoiced, claiming it was long overdue, that the masks were off, the curtain pulled back, and the man behind the empire had finally been exposed. Celebrities danced around the moment. Cryptic Instagram stories, vague subtweets, silence where there had once been praise. But one voice pierced through the noise without saying a word. 50 Cent. Just hours after the sentencing, he posted a single image on Instagram, a throne shattered in pieces. No caption. He didn't need one. The message was clear. For years he'd whispered, warned, trolled, and teased. Now the proof stood in front of everyone, and he didn't have to say "I told you so." He'd already won. But while the internet raged, Diddy sat in stunned silence. The verdict still ringing in his ears, the words from the judge echoing louder than the applause or the outrage outside. Then came the moment that made it real. The bailiff stepped forward. No delay, no time for reflection, no grace period. He stood, or tried to, but his body was slow, as if weighed down by disbelief. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. There was no red carpet exit, no spin, no fixer waiting outside. The cuffs weren't symbolic anymore. They were real, cold, loud, final. As they locked around his wrists, he turned back, just for a moment. Instinct, maybe. Desperation, maybe. Hoping to find a familiar face, a sympathetic glance. But no one looked at him. Not his legal team, not the reporters, not the crowd that had once screamed his name. And then the door closed behind him. Not with drama, not with spectacle, just with silence. The kind that lingers. The kind that sticks. The kind that signals the beginning of something much darker. For Diddy, the empire was over. But the consequences were just getting started.